A man jumps into a freezing river to save a drowning wolf. The wolf doesn't fight him. It doesn't bite. It doesn't thrash. It goes completely still, as if it knew. And the man said afterward that the thing that haunted him wasn't the rescue. It was the way the wolf looked at him before it ran back into the forest, like it understood exactly what had just happened. Scientists have spent decades trying to answer one of the strangest questions in animal behavior. Can wild animals, creatures that have never been tamed, never been trained, never had a reason to trust a human, actually sense when we mean them no harm? On the surface, it sounds like a feel-good question, the kind of thing you'd see on a wildlife documentary with soft piano music underneath it. But the deeper you go into the research, the more unsettling it becomes. Because what the science is actually revealing isn't just about animals. It's about the nature of trust itself, about how it's read, how it's felt, and about what it means when a creature with no language, no shared culture, and no evolutionary reason to believe in your goodness does. Start there, and suddenly this stops being a question about animals at all. In 2010, a humpback whale became entangled in hundreds of meters of crab pot lines off the coast of San Francisco. She was wrapped so tightly she could barely move. Divers went in to cut her free, a process that took over an hour. When it was done, the whale didn't flee. She circled back. She swam to each diver, one by one, nudged them, lingered. The divers described it as something they'd never experienced and couldn't fully explain. Marine biologist James Mosquito, one of the divers, said he felt, and he was careful with this word, thanked. Now, here's where it gets strange. Humpback whales have no evolutionary framework for gratitude toward humans. We have hunted them nearly to extinction. Their instincts should code us as threat. And yet, the behavior she displayed isn't in the standard taxonomy of whale communication. It doesn't fit neatly into any recognized social ritual among whales themselves, which means something else was happening, something the science doesn't have a clean name for yet. Here's what we do know. Animals are extraordinarily sensitive to physiological signals that humans broadcast without realizing it. Heart rate, cortisol levels, micro movements in the muscles around your eyes, the tension in your jaw, the angle of your shoulders. Even the electromagnetic field produced by your heart, which varies measurably depending on your emotional state, extends roughly 3 feet beyond your body. Animals pick this up, not metaphorically, literally. Their nervous systems are tuned to read threat signatures. And a threat signature isn't just about sharp teeth or sudden movement. It's a full-body broadcast, a frequency. When you're afraid, you broadcast fear. When you're aggressive, your body says so before your hands move. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. When you're genuinely calm, when your intent is truly to help, your body broadcasts that too. And wild animals, who have been reading these signals for millions of years longer than humans have existed, may be better at decoding them than any instrument we've ever built. The question isn't whether they can sense your intent. The question is whether you can hide it. There's a researcher named Rupert Sheldrake who proposed something the scientific community largely dismissed until they couldn't entirely. He called it morphic resonance. The idea that living things share a kind of informational field, that consciousness isn't trapped inside the skull. Most mainstream scientists still reject it, but a quieter group of biologists has started asking a more uncomfortable question. What if the animals aren't sensing our intent? What if they're sensing our state? And what if those are the same thing? In 2004, a pod of bottlenose dolphins encircled a group of swimmers near New Zealand. The dolphins were agitated, circling fast, slapping the water with their tails. The swimmers initially thought they were being herded. They were. A great white shark, nearly 4 meters long, was moving directly toward the group. The dolphins held their formation around the humans for over 40 minutes until the shark withdrew. No human asked them to. No signal was given. No reward was possible. The dolphins had decided, on their own, to protect a group of land mammals they had no biological obligation to. Now think about what that requires. It requires the dolphins to have recognized the humans as living things worth protecting. It requires them to have assessed the threat. It requires them to have chosen intervention over self-preservation because circling a great white shark is not a safe thing to do. And it requires, somewhere in that calculation, a reading of the human's vulnerability, their fear, their need. But then, something strange happened when researchers tried to replicate similar scenarios in controlled settings. The dolphins didn't respond the same way. When the fear was performed staged, artificial, the dolphins ignored it. When the fear was real, they responded, which suggests they weren't responding to behavior at all. They were responding to something underneath behavior. Something true. And this is where it stops being a wildlife documentary. Because what this science is quietly describing, what these encounters keep pointing toward, is the idea that authenticity has a biological signal. That you cannot fake your way into the trust of a wild animal, not at the level of the nervous system, not at the level of the body's electromagnetic field, not at the level of the micro-expressions your face makes in the 400 milliseconds before you even know what you're feeling. Wild animals, in other words, may be among the most accurate lie detectors on the planet. They don't listen to your words. They don't respond to your performed emotion. They read what is actually happening inside you. And here's the disturbing implication. If wild animals can read us that clearly if your stress, your fear, your aggression, your care, your calm are all being broadcast constantly in ways you cannot control, then what does that say about how we move through the world among each other? What does it say about every time you've told someone you were fine when you weren't? Every time you performed confidence while drowning? Every time you smiled at someone while your nervous system was screaming? Maybe the animals aren't the strange ones. Maybe we are. Maybe we're the only species that has learned to ignore what the body is saying. There's a concept in behavioral ecology called the flight initiation distance. It describes how close a predator or a human can get to a wild animal before the animal runs. It varies by species, by individual, by context. But researchers discovered something they weren't expecting. The flight initiation distance of wild animals toward humans has been shrinking in urban environments, not because the animals have become tame, not because they've been domesticated, but because they've been reading us long enough to update their model. They have learned to distinguish between a human who is a threat and a human who is not. They are doing something that, in cognitive science, we call theory of mind. The ability to model what another being is thinking, intending, feeling. We used to believe this was uniquely human. We were wrong. And the more unsettling implication isn't that animals have theory of mind. It's that they may have better theory of mind than we do. Because they haven't learned to override the signal. They haven't been socialized to smile when they mean to bite. They haven't spent decades learning to perform emotions they don't feel in order to survive social structures that punish honesty. They just read, accurately, cleanly, without agenda. Here's the part that keeps researchers up at night. If wild animals can sense genuine care, if they can distinguish between a human who means harm and a human who means to help, then what we're actually describing is a form of interspecies moral recognition. Not intelligence in the way we measure it, not language, not culture, but something older, something that existed before all of those things. A recognition that crosses every boundary we've ever drawn between ourselves and the rest of the living world. And when you sit with that, really sit with it, something shifts. Because we've spent most of human history building a story about what separates us from animals, we've put ourselves at the top of every hierarchy. We've used that distance to justify everything from factory farming to habitat destruction to the casual cruelty of treating living things as resources. But if a wolf can feel that you mean to help it, if a whale can seek you out after you saved her life, if dolphins can choose to protect strangers from a different species because those strangers were afraid, then the line we drew was always fiction. And somewhere, in bodies older and wiser than our philosophies, they have always known it.